That's all the muscles around the teeth. The problem is if we have a delay in either growth or the eruption sequence, or if we have something like a mouth breather. Sorry for bringing that up. Mouth breathers tend to have their mouths open at night. When they swallow, they don't tend to spread the jaw out, the maxilla out as much as it should. So you'll get narrower jaws, narrower maxilla. Doesn't always correlate with the growth of the mandible. And you can get some occlusal disharmonies up to having open bites. You can have cross bites, all those things we'll talk about later on. But if the tongue and the lips are going to position the anterior teeth properly, this also depends on do we have proper skeletal growth. You will have varying degrees of overlap and overjet, right? We already know that overlap and overjet are providing our anterior guidance. Why is that important? Right. It determines, well, yeah, I got to get in here. What determines the morphology on a natural tooth? Huh?
You're supposed to...
Got a natural tooth.
It's the angle between the...
Okay, what determines the morphology, the cusp height, the ridge direction, the groove direction on a natural tooth?
The angle of the posterior and anterior guidance.
What? Opposing forces?
Posterior.
Right. The natural development of the lobes of the tooth. Right? A newly erupted tooth will have the morphology of that tooth. It will never have been an occlusion. An extracted tooth that has never erupted but is formed will have the occlusal morphology and anatomy of that tooth. Okay? What we're talking about here is the prosthetic morphology if we're restoring teeth. Okay? That's why we need to know all of these movements. Now, as the teeth erupt in the neutral zone, as they start to come together, mandibular movements and anterior guidance will define what space the tooth can erupt into, and the opposing forces will determine at what level the tooth can erupt up to or down to. Okay? So that establishes our occlusal plane. Right? But let's say that the lower anterior tooth erupted outside the maxillary anterior tooth. Do we have anterior guidance anymore? No. Is that going to have an effect on the developing posterior dentition? Okay. Now the question is, why did that happen? We have to look at it, is it a skeletal problem? Is it just maybe a tongue thrusting problem? Is it a lip problem? Because if you're going to try and correct all those things, they're all in different fashions. But you got to understand that they have an effect on the posterior teeth if you're going to restore them. Okay? If you don't have anterior guidance, what do you think the occlusal morphology on the posterior teeth is going to look like? Okay? It's going to tend to be flatter, broader, and more open. If you have steep anterior guidance and steep condylar guidance, chances are you're going to have sharper, deeper, cuspier teeth, if that's what the genetics of the patient allowed for.
What about the sleep guidance?
Speed guidance just means that you're going to protect whatever anatomy was on that tooth. So that's why I said if the genetics of the patient allowed them to have sharp, steep cusps, they're probably going to continue to have sharp, steep cusps. They don't have anterior guidance, or they have a lot of horizontal overlap that allows things to move, or they've got a lot of Bennett shift in the back. All of those things are going to affect what goes on the tops and posterior teeth.
The fact that they have sleep anterior guidance, so then the cusps, the posterior cusps will be sharper and higher.
It can be.
Is that because of the working units? They have to be working so that the cusps can fit in and out of the grooves? Are they related in that way?
They are sort of related that way. The anterior guidance is what separates the mandible when you go into protrusive or lateral or medial intrusive. Okay? And there are different kinds of guidance. We'll just barely go over those. But the steeper the guidance can allow for steeper, sharper cusps. Shallower guidance usually means shallower, shorter cusps.